Holistic Earth. The 7 deadly sins, also known as the capital vices or cardinal sins, represent a classification of vices within Christian teachings. The standard list includes pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth, each considered contrary to the 7 heavenly virtues. These sins are often viewed as abuses or excessive manifestations of natural faculties or passions, such as gluttony abusing the desire to eat. The classification originated with Tertullian and was further developed by Evagrius Ponticus. These sins are extensively discussed in treatises and depicted in various art forms on Catholic churches and in older textbooks. The historical background includes Greco-Roman antecedents, where Roman writers like Horace emphasized virtues and warned against vices. The currently recognized 7 deadly sins have their origin in the 4th century monk Evagrius Ponticus's list of 8 evil thoughts, which he categorized into physical, emotional, and mental types. Evagrius's list was later translated into Latin by John Cassian, contributing to the Western tradition's spiritual practices. In AD 590, Pope Gregory I revised the list, combining some sins and adding envy, creating a more widely accepted classification. This revised list, known as the capital sins, is still retained by various Christian denominations. The 7 deadly sins, listed in order of increasing severity according to Pope Gregory I, are lust, gluttony, greed, sorrow/despair, wrath, sloth, vainglory, and pride. These sins are considered serious transgressions that lead to spiritual death. Catholic prelate Henry Edward Manning views the 7 deadly sins as pathways to eternal death, while Martin Chemnitz, a Lutheran divine, urged clergy to remind the faithful of these sins. The sins are often depicted in allegorical images, such as the human heart subject to each sin represented by animals. Each sin is examined in detail. Lust, intense longing, often associated with unbridled sexual desire. Gluttony, overindulgence and overconsumption to the point of waste, including various forms like eating too expensively or too eagerly. Greed, inordinate desire for material wealth, considered akin to pride and potentially leading to evil. Sloth, absence of interest or habitual disinclination to exertion, encompassing spiritual, mental, and physical states. Wrath, uncontrolled feelings of anger, rage, and hatred, often manifesting a desire for vengeance. Envy, insatiable desire for traits or possessions of others, leading to sadness or resentment. Pride, considered the most demonic and the source of other sins, pride is the opposite of humility and severs the spirit from God. The sins have been depicted by various artists throughout history, including Peter Bruegel the Elder, Lucas Cranach the Elder, Peter Paul Rubens, William Hogarth, Paul Cadmus, and Chris Offaly. Additionally, historical sins like aestia, spiritual sloth, and vainglory, unjustified boasting, are discussed, with aestia being a precursor to lesser sins like restlessness and instability. The origins of the 7 deadly sins can be traced back to a combination of biblical teachings, early Christian theology, and philosophical traditions. While the specific classification into 7 distinct sins gained prominence in Christian thought, the roots of each sin can be found in both biblical and classical literature. Pride, superbia. Biblical roots. Pride is often considered the original and most serious of the 7 deadly sins. Its roots can be traced to Lucifer's rebellion against God, as described in Christian theology. The devil's pride led to his fall from grace. Philosophical influence. The concept of hubris in ancient Greek thought, representing excessive pride or arrogance, played a role in shaping the Christian understanding of this sin. Greed, avaritia. Biblical roots. Greed is condemned in various biblical passages, such as the 10th commandment, which prohibits coveting. The Bible warns against the love of money, stating that it is the root of all evil, 1 Timothy 6 verse 10. Philosophical influence. The philosophical notion of an inordinate desire for material wealth, prevalent in Greco-Roman thought, contributed to the development of the concept of greed. Lust, luxuria. Biblical roots. lust is frequently condemned in the Bible, with teachings against adultery, fornication, and impure thoughts. The Sermon on the Mount, as delivered by Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, addresses lustful thoughts as equivalent to adultery, Matthew 5 verses 27 to 28. Philosophical influence. The Greek concept of eros, representing passionate or erotic love, influenced early Christian views on the dangers of unrestrained sexual desire. Envy, invidia. Biblical roots. Envy can be traced back to the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain's jealousy of his brother leads to fratricide, Genesis 4 verses 1 to 16. The 10th commandment also condemns coveting. Philosophical influence. Philosophers such as Aristotle explored the destructive nature of envy, viewing it as a corrosive emotion that harms both the envier and the envied. Gluttony, gula. Biblical roots. While the Bible warns against gluttony, associating it with laziness and lack of self-control, specific condemnations can be found in Proverbs 23 verses 20 to 21, and elsewhere. Philosophical influence. Greek philosophers, including Plato and Aristotle, discussed the importance of moderation in bodily desires, laying the groundwork for the Christian understanding of gluttony. Wrath, ira. Biblical roots. Numerous biblical passages condemn wrath and emphasize forgiveness. For example, Proverbs 14 verse 17 states, "A quick-tempered person does foolish things, and the one who devises evil schemes is hated." Philosophical influence. Greek philosophers like Seneca and Aristotle discussed the destructive nature of uncontrolled anger, influencing Christian views on the sin of wrath. Sloth, aestia. Biblical roots. While the term sloth may not have a direct equivalent in biblical texts, the Bible emphasizes the importance of diligence, responsibility, and avoiding spiritual lethargy. Philosophical influence. Philosophers like Aristotle discussed the virtues of industriousness, and the Christian concept of sloth may have been influenced by the broader philosophical discourse on the virtues of an active life. These sins were further refined and organized into a systematic framework by early Christian theologians. Evagrius Ponticus and later Pope Gregory I played pivotal roles in crystallizing the list of 7 deadly sins, incorporating biblical teachings, philosophical insights, and early Christian traditions. The fusion of these elements contributed to the formulation of a comprehensive and enduring classification of sins within Christian doctrine.